Just a quick disclaimer, if you're sensitive to stuff like body horror, flesh, physical mutation, or anything like that, this might not be the best video to watch for you. I'm gonna be honest, like when I was halfway through recording this, some of that stuff started to get to me too. So just putting that out there. If that kind of stuff freaks you out, maybe don't watch this. Also, if you're eating anything, maybe don't watch this. The topics in this video are kind of gross at times, so just putting that out there. Just proceed with caution, I guess, and enjoy. SCP-610. Due to the vast area of infection that SCP-610 covers, containment is impossible. Isolation of the area has proven far more effective, and permission has been granted by the Russian government to establish a perimeter to keep people out of these areas under the guise of military operations. Should any organism displaying traits consistent with SCP-610 be sighted near this perimeter, then the established protocol requires it to be engaged at range with small arms until immobile, and then dispatch using incendiary weapons and munitions from as great distance as possible. Any living thing coming in physical contact with an organism infected with SCP-610 is considered expendable, and is to be immediately terminated and incinerated. Any persons coming within 3 meters of SCP-610 infected life are immediately withdrawn from the area. Be isolated from the rest of their team and subject to medical examination using only remote techniques to determine if infection has occurred, and appropriate steps taken based on that determination. At present, the known infection vectors for SCP-610 spread seem to be focused on physical contact. Drone movements within heavily infected areas have returned air samples containing minute particulate, which, when exposed to organic compounds, will result in the spread of SCP-610. The result of these particular tests have revealed that most require 7 days to manifest, if at all. With the exception of direct contact with exposed lung and liver tissue, these particular tests show a rapid rate of growth, which requires incineration of the testing environment within no more than 24 hours after initial exposure, with even a 2-hour mishap risking a compromised facility event. Given that this kind of rapid growth only occurs in organic material existing outside the human body, this form of infection is currently considered a minor concern. These peculiarities have given rise to a series of questions regarding the possible origin of the infection in conjunction with the failed containment protocol remains at a scorched earth policy at this time, and no concern for transmission via water or air infection parameters exist, barring substantial changes in the field. Initial reports of SCP-610 came direct from the Russian government through undisclosable channels. These reports consisted primarily of disappearances of farmers in the region and were not considered until local police, followed by regional police, and finally a government-dispatched agent all failed to report within a 72-hour period. A small military contingent was dispatched to the area and quickly withdrew, at which point a foundation was contacted to investigate. The area SCP-610 affects is close to Lake Baikal in southern Siberia. Areas of known infection are marked on the map provided to us here. Containment perimeters are marked in blue surrounding these infection areas as of present, and no further locations have been identified. Incursions into the perimeter must be reported prior to conducting, confirmed with an exploration, and debriefed on immediately following return. SCP-610 appears to be a contagious skin disease at first, with symptoms of rash, itching, and increased skin sensitivity. Within 3 hours, the disease will cause blemishes heavily resembling scar tissue to form in the chest and arm areas, spreading to the legs and back within the additional hour, consuming the victim completely within 5 hours. Exposure to higher temperatures vastly decreases the time for the contagion to spread, and complete infections have been recorded as little as 5 minutes. After the completion of the infection occurs, the victim's life functions will cease approximately 3 minutes after, at which time they will restart in 2 to 3 times the activity rate of a normal human. Following this, the scar tissue on the victims will start to move on its own accord and grow at a rapid rate. Normal human features start to disappear, at which point the infection and the path of mutation appears to be largely random. Subjects observed in this stage of infection have been recorded growing 3 or more limbs, such as a type such as arm or legs, The head may become misshapen and elongate or widen out, and parts of the subject may split open from which additional branches of flesh will grow. The duration of this stage of infection is unknown, and not all subjects appear to progress to the later stages. Under unknown conditions, an infected individual will cease moving and place itself in a location it deems suitable to where it roots itself. The fleshy growth on the victim will then begin to spread across all surrounding objects and consume them. Such objects do not spread the infection as living creatures do. However, and the effect of prolonged contact with these objects is recorded later in this document, it is assumed that this behavior is to create an area hospitable for continued growth of the later infected. Observation of life infected by SCP-610 by staff is impossible. Those infected with the disease immediately seek out aid as natural human impulse, resulting in unintended infections. Those infected past the scar tissue phase actively and aggressively attempt to infect anyone approaching them within an undefined area. It has been established that should an infected be capable of sight and observe an uninfected, it will proceed towards them. If the infected have lost the ability of sight, a range of approximately 30 meters is considered safe. Observation of SCP-610 infected settlements has been established by using artificial methods such as remote robots. Data returned from these observations, coupled with the openly aggressive nature of the infected attempt to spread SCP-610, has resulted in data classification. However, so long as nothing is allowed to enter or leave, the infected areas are considered a neutralized threat. Of concern are the cavernous areas beneath the infected settlements that were discovered during the exploration of these attempts to get research personnel into these areas are underway. After establishing the containment perimeter for SCP-610, the Russian government approved our request to research and investigate the area. For the first such exploration, a small camera mounted on a unit known as Herbie was dispatched at a safe distance and directed towards Site A. Herbie has a battery life of around 12 hours and control range far wider than that required for this dispatch. Herbie is able to enter Site A without incident. The landscape around Site A shows early stages of assimilation by a singular SCP-610 infected who have fallen at largely random intervals around what remains of the village. Many of the homes appear to have suffered fire damage long since put out. However, a fair amount remain intact. Aerial reconnaissance of Site A combined with thermal imaging has put an estimated amount of 79 infected. Immobile infected are included in this number. However, it is difficult to ascertain the exact percentage of immobile versus mobile. Varying degrees of physical mutation due to SCP-610 are present in Site A, and it is assumed that all the inhabitants are in advanced stages of infection. Herbie observed the exterior of the village for 2 hours, during which time all infected behaved with what appeared to be a loose sense of social structure. Because Herbie remained stationary during this observation period, it's unknown precisely what each individual infected person was doing. However, the central plaza experienced occasional bursts of activity and downtime. Requiring more information, Herbie was directed to follow an infected as it entered a home. There is a bumpy camera feed as Herbie scoots over the gravel behind the quickly shambling infected person. The interior of the home is the same that attached to the primary file for SCP-610. The infected being tailed is the one sitting at the table. After entering the home, Herbie's camera was raised slowly as not to draw attention. This action was either unnoticed or ignored. The infected person watched from the doorway as it hobbles around the home and stops at each of the other visible infected organisms. However, it appears to ignore the one at the table. The one under the table, which, while not immobile, does not leave the area. What this creature was doing before infection is unclear. After lapping the table and repeating this procedure 3 times, the primary infected person, known as Alpha, henceforward, stops at the bedridden infected, known as Beta, and proceeds to assault it with furious punches. Beta is unable to move the bed for unknown reasons, but it's not completely immobile as it flails its arms in response to the beatings delivered by Alpha. After several sustained minutes of the beating, a piercing sound explodes from the area around Beta and proceeds to project a cloud of unknown matter into the air from its chest cavity. Alpha lingers in the cloud as it floats in the air around them, slowly descending to the ground. The unknown life form on the table alongside Beta begins to twitch in an apparent seizure. And Alpha then laps around the room twice more, stopping at each infected organism but still ignoring the one under the table, as well as Beta now. After these 2 laps, Alpha seats itself at the table and reaches out to position the 3 plates atop it as a sudden dinner set. After the plates are positioned, the facial tendrils descend from Alpha, wiggle up, and start to coil on one of the plates before tearing apart and separating. This is repeated at each plate. One image attached to SCP-610's primary file is an image of this occurrence. After each plate is filled with Alpha's flesh, it leaves the table and approaches Herbie, which is moved from Alpha's path. Alpha leaves the home, but Herbie's camera remains focused on the table. After several minutes, a group comprised of 6 to 7 infected enter the room from the outside, still ignoring Herbie. Each infected shambles as if the movement is difficult, jerking in large steps or spraying in small ones. These infected all surround the table. Each take turns grabbing handfuls of the flesh substance left behind by Alpha, pressing it into whatever orifices on themselves they can. Some into mouths, some to the chest, some behind their backs, some under the arms. When all the plates are empty, the groups leave. Herbie remains here for several more minutes before retracting his camera and leaving. Immediately after leaving the home, Herbie collapses an object, panning the camera around the direction of what appears to be Alpha, whose facial tendrils are intermingling with another infected, having similar mutations. The impact is ignored, and the 2 infected part ways after several minutes. Herbie is then directed to explore more areas of the village. The remains of what appears to have been a store show signs of severe fire damage as well as activity from inside the building, which Herbie moves to investigate. The door is slightly ajar, with firm movements of Herbie it is pushed open. No notice is taken of this action or it is ignored. Inside the store are several infected persons, most of whom are standing around. However, one is on the ground rolling back and forth over the space of approximately 0.3 meters, and is ignored by the others. Herbie rolls under the divider separating the cashier area from customer area and pans around the counter. The upper half of the person is protruding from the cellar door behind the counter. This person does not appear to be suffering from an advanced infection and wears the garb of a Russian soldier. Herbie zooms the camera in to confirm identification and has noticed the eyes of this person are in constant movement, often focusing on Herbie. The rest of the soldier does not move. Herbie is directed to leave the area and proceeds to the back room. In this storage area, a large pile of bodies are stacked together. Some wearing pieces of clothing are visible and appear to contain both military garb and everyday clothing. No facial features are discernible on any of the bodies due to the way they are stacked. Atop the bodies, an infected sits, appearing to have its lower parts fused to the pile and its upper half in a wild state of flailing and seizure. Approximately every 10 seconds, a burst of spores flies at the top of the infected, which linger in the air. Herbie is directed to leave the building. After leaving this building, Herbie passes by the village well, surrounding which a series of mobile infected facing the wall. The arms of each of these infected persons are stretched out, one in contact with the next, forming a perfect chain, save for one whose arms are stretched down its sides. Herbie passes by this last infected to approach what appears to have been a town well or a mayor's building when the infected becomes immobile and snatches a rover up. Video feed from Herbie focuses over the face of an infected who is strangely in perfect shape given the condition of the rest of the body, which is horribly bloated. This infected was once a young girl from appearance, age estimated to be 10 or 12. Herbie is rolled side to side in its grip as his face stares motionless at the rover. The infected's face suddenly balloons in size and explodes outwards in a series of fleshy flaps that grips Herbie and draws it inside. Herbie's video feed terminates here. Herbie was considered lost at this point, however no one in control remembered to turn off the video feed, assuming it was cut. 5 hours later, Herbie's video feed resumed, stationary but at a raised level, pointing at the upper rim of the village well. The video feed contains some blur due to what appears to be a slimy film, which often oozes across the lens when not observed, provides perfect quality recording. Herbie does not respond to any of the remote commands, but its video jerks back and forth from target to target, zooming in and out on its own accord. Video feed is cut manually and all connections to Herbie's unit are erased. During the construction of the perimeter surrounding SCP-610's containment area, several D-Class personnel were infected due to assaults from infected villagers or animals roaming the area, in addition to a number of infections as a result of escape attempts and careless behavior. Most of these infected personnel were immediately destroyed with flamethrowers. However, a small collection of infected were contained in cold storage units, which prolonged the inevitable progression of SCP-610's mutative properties. The decision was made to utilize some of these infected personnel as video relays and dispatch them to nearby sites. Due to the concern over loss of equipment as evidenced in SCP-610-L1, all 3 subjects that were used in this manner were sent in with a single video system to Site C. Additional equipment used for this dispatch include a 1 gallon container of gasoline, 3 emergency flares, 3 9mm pistols with 3 magazines of ammo each, and 3 single-serving food rations. The infected personnel were instructed to observe and avoid interaction with the infected villagers as long as possible, but should a situation arise where they are met with aggression or feel like they were losing themselves to SCP-610's influence, they are free to kill as many infected villagers as they choose and do as much damage to infected objects or property as possible while maintaining video feed. The intent of this order was to provide data of SCP-610's infected communities in a raid situation so a plan of eradication could be better established. At the time of this expedition, Site C was suspected to be a possible origin point for SCP-610. Having far fewer mobile infected than other sites, as well as structures that appear to have been layered over several times with terraforming effects to the immobile infected. Dispatched D-Class personnel, henceforth known as DI-1, DI-2, and DI-3, were directed to pay particular attention to anything that could be considered an origin point for SCP-610. The trek around the perimeter camp to Site C was uneventful. There is no evidence of any native animal life in the area. As Site C approached, there is a notable rise in the temperature within the last 30 meters of the trip that necessitates the removal of heavy tool-based coverings that were provided. The temperature rises again sharply to the entrance of Site C proper, which requires further studying of garments over fear of heat stroke. Site C is described as being heavily humid at around 32 degrees Celsius or 89 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the first immediately noticed traits about Site C is the array of immobile pylons which encircle what is believed to be the entirety of the site, separated by an apparent distance of 5 to 6 meters. Each pylon appears to be 2 to 4 infected persons fused together in one spot. On some of these pylons, features such as faces and anuses are still visible in addition to several other holes which do not currently occur, all appearing act as heat vents, where heat is generated is unknown. Current belief is that this is an advanced stage of SCP-610 terraforming its environment to facilitate the spread of itself. DI-2, who was the furthest along progression of SCP-610 by a number of hours, begins to seizure after only a few minutes in Site C examination of the pylons. The progression to the scar tissue phase of SCP-610 infection is observed in full course when DI-2 spasms on the ground, his entire body being overtaken by sticky tan flesh almost entirely after 45 seconds. DI-2 was terminated by a gunshot from DI-1 and its equipment is left where it is. The spread of SCP-610 over DI-2 continues even after death of the body until all movement ceases. As perimeter control is relaying new instructions to DI-1 and DI-3 regarding the situation, there is a shift in the ground covering Site C, where DI-2's body is. Video feed shows the fleshlight growth splitting open beneath his body and a series of ropey tendrils coming from the gap to closed warped inside. This opening closes up quickly. Total time elapsed about 3 seconds. As DI-1 and DI-3 decide to act quickly in these hotter temperatures, fearing the same fate, they proceed to the village center and encounter another previously unknown phenomenon. In the precise center of town rising above what was the community well, is a sphere suspended by angled supports comprised of SCP-610 flesh. The ball is riddled with features of humans in early stages of SCP-610 infection, as well as a good number of assumed to be in later stages. Number of specimens of non-human life forms such as bears and deer are visible within the mass. The entire sphere of flesh pulses at a roughly 5-second interval between each pulse and emits a rain of spore-like material from its equator. This material floats to the ground and appears to be absorbed by the converted environment. DI-3 begins to douse the sphere in the provided gasoline, and when questioned by a panicking DI-1, explains this looked like a good thing and burn as any. At this point, perimeter control has ceased giving any commands to the deterioration of events. There is no reaction from anything within Site 3 to Site C to any of this activity until the precise moment at which a lit emergency flare is applied to the spherical mass, which immediately goes up in flames. A remote feed plays black and noise from an unknown location that seems to come from a location far outside of Site C, but was reported to be heard as perimeter control by both Site C and A. This noise is described as both explosive and alive. Within 15 seconds following the sound's dissipation, Site A reported that a series of explosions had occurred within the village. 5 seconds after this report, the spherical mass in the center of Site C explodes. DI-1 and DI-3 are thrown by the blast. DI-3 is confirmed deceased by DI-1 after regaining his footing, having suffered injury from stone shrapnel from the well. DI-1 is able to report he has bruises and ringing ears, but aside from the rapidly spreading SCP-610 infection, he suffered no blast damage. During this recording of footage, DI-1 has his video equipment removed and was looking into it. Due to the angle of its recording, it is unknown precisely what occurred in Site C, but something draws DI-1's attention back to the center of the town, where he stares for several moments before being pulled in the opposite direction. The video equipment falling to the ground and recording in a skyward direction, the last moments of footage from DI-1's video unit would display a humanoid figure moving through the air, followed by the sound of an impact in the same direction. Within 3 seconds of this event, an unknown creature steps onto the recording video equipment and destroys it. Perimeter control remained on high alert for a full 24 hours at all locations without any incident following the event. The destruction caused by the rapid collapse of the Site C exploration attempt during SCP-610-L2 resulted in a series of unexpected events in Site A. As a strange spherical formation in Site C was burned and destroyed, the SCP-610 infected inhabiting Site A were reported by aerial drones during seizures and convulsions. The immobile SCP-610 infected rapidly shriveled and died along with the flesh material that spread across inanimate objects in the village. The mobile SCP-610 infected who were able to regain their footing all proceeded to what appears to have been formerly an upper-class residence that entered the building. As the infected entered the building, it suffered a foundational collapse, revealing the presence of a sinkhole beneath it. The size of the hole in relation to the structure above it imposed an impossibility for an entire building to collapse, suggesting something within the hole applied force directly to the structure with the intent to pull it inside and expose the hole. The revealed hole is approximately large enough to accommodate 3 grown men standing shoulder to shoulder. Light sources applied by the remote drones failed to penetrate further than 4 meters stepped into the hole. Objects dropped down the hole did not produce an impact sound, suggesting a bottom potentially more than 1,000 meters down. Research of the exterior of the Site A hole was only able to be carried out for 2 hours at a time. Samples of the atmosphere in Site A indicated a complete death of SCP-610 related materials. All infectious life that did not evacuate the hole died above ground quickly and became shriveled husks. Manned exploration of Site A was approved and commenced immediately. In a span of 30 minutes, a total of 3 research teams consisting of 2 to 3 researching staff and 4 to 5 armed escort each were dispatched and setting up stations within the remains of the village. Samples of deceased SCP-610 infected were converted matter were sent back to Perimeter HQ for processing and transport. One team was able to recover a small sample of still living infected SCP-610 tissue substance from a building and packed it for research. Within the second hour of exploration, Site A, a series of echo reverberation units were set up surrounding the hole with the intent of getting an accurate mapping of the hole and possible branch tunnels. At the end of the second hour before the echo units to be evacuated, seismic activity began to occur within Site A. 2 teams of the original 3 remained on site. The third en route back to Perimeter HQ with samples. The third team was instructed to proceed back to Perimeter HQ when seismic activity began, and was told that Site A would not be returned to for assistance. Seismic activity at Site A capped at a 2.3 Richter scale level before petering off. Immediately following the seismic event, a torrent of SCP-610 spores erupted from the hole and layered the area around it for a span of 50 meters. All staff on Site A were in hazardous material suits. The spore burst was startling but did not lead to any infections, as the eruption was reported by both teams at Site A came under attack from aerial life forms infected with SCP-610. These organisms were captured by the remote drone video equipment and showed to be extremely advanced stages of mutation. It is impossible to tell what they mutated from to this present state. Many of the avian creatures attacked by splitting their heads in half and clapping them against the research members, pulling them into the air and dropping them down the hole when possible. These avian infected proved vulnerable to small arms fire, and dispatching a total of 2 research staff were lost to the hole and 1 injured due to crossfire. The injured staff was put down immediately upon showing signs of infection due to his suit breach. Before video and radio contact was lost, the remaining teams inside Site A a second seismic event began to occur starting out in the 1 to 1.5 range in scale. Attention was directed to the hole to prepare for a second assault. Second spore bursts erupted from the hole during the rising seismic activity, at the point where scale is registered to 3 to 3.5 in force, and the unseen SCP-610 entity began to emerge from the hole. The only footage captured of this creature depicts an engorged human head approximately 20 times larger than normal, pressing itself out of the hole with no discernible body. Video and radio contact were lost as seismic forces increased to 7 on the scale for about 2 seconds duration and abruptly ceased. Further aerial surveillance of Site A hole and area depicts 0 activity and no traces of the research team or their ever having been there. All personnel and equipment were considered lost. Events regarding the discovery, research, and handling of SCP-610 rapidly degrade to the point where fail-safe options are being considered. For over 1 hour, nothing further happened at Site A following the loss of research teams during the seismic events of SCP-610-L3 and subsequent contact with previously unseen SCP-610 life forms. With the absence of activity at Site A remote drone dispatch was authorized in 2 parts. The first part would drop a remote relay device to the entrance of a Site A sinkhole, and the second part would dispatch a drone to the hole directly to relay its data to the remote relay for transmission back to HQ. Drones on site were powered by solar energy with the battery maintained for 4-hour charge. Attached is the video log recovered from the Site A sinkhole drone before its loss. The video feed activates. The researcher's face is seen looking into the camera, applying a polishing cloth to the lens. This is the explorative drone SCP-610-1 coming online. Systems checked out, video confirmed. Feed is good to relay station. We are testing rotors now and deploying is successful. The sounds of helicopter blades start up as video feed begins to lift into the air. Camera tilts left and right to test pan features and directs itself towards the Site A sinkhole. Video feed is go. Engines are go. Blinks are green. Alright, sending drone down now. Audio from the outside world fades away as the camera angles itself down and peers into the darkness within the sinkhole. After approximately 2 minutes of descent lights on the drone activate and illuminate a roughly dug shaft. Initially, it is unclear what could have created the hole, but at a glance it would appear the shaft was created by a single event rather than dug over time. At 15 meters descent, there are traces of SCP-610 material attached to the dirt and stuck to rocks. The material is dormant but retains its texture and appearance. Light samples from above ground level will shrivel and die rapidly, unlike samples above ground level which shrivel and dry rapidly. There is a possible connection with this material and the events last recorded during SCP-610-L3. Descent continues. At 100 meters depth, branch tunnels become visible in the walls of the sinkhole. Panning of the camera reveals small tunnels branching out at apparently random intervals, but which are not restricted to one side of the hole. These tunnels are considered too small for any useful exploration to occur. Descent continues. Increase in density of 610 materials on walls is noted as depth increases. At 250 meters, at the bottom of the sinkhole becomes visible, and the tunnel slopes sharply, suggesting a natural formation, which was already expected. Drone video shifts to illuminate the tunnel, and drone proceeds forward through the area. SCP-610 coats entirely the tunnel now, and carrier station to keep the drone from coming in contact with any surface. Movement is detected about 5 meters ahead. Lights on drone are dimmed and weapons come into line. The SCP-610 drone is equipped with 5.56 machine gun containing 50 rounds of ammo. This is meant to be used to deter wildlife away from the drone and defend against aggression when possible, rather than dispatch a target, although it is fully capable of handling human aggressors in small groups. Camera focus turns to the moving mass of flesh ahead at 3 meters. After focus clears, the movement appears to be coming from what appears to be a deer, uninfected, wriggling in the grips of tendrils composed of SCP-610 material. The deer is suspended above the ground with unclear intent. The drone is moved past the trapped deer while holding it in view of the camera until safely away. Nothing occurs with the deer and the drone proceeds past undisturbed. Previously fairly level ground ahead of the tunnel displays large humps in apparently random placement. 5 meters ahead of the drone, 30 meters past the deer. Upon approach, these lumps turn out to be similar to the infected villagers who escaped from a Site A into the sinkhole after destruction of Site C. The sound of rushing water is now detected and the drone is pushed forward. At 100 meters further into the tunnel, the sound of running water is now deafening. Drone lights reveal a stream of running water potentially coming from one of the adjacent rivers in the area. A sample vial is placed in the water, allowed to collect and then release with an active tracking beacon. Later recovery of the sample indicates no SCP-610 contamination of groundwater. The tunnel splits in two at this point. One tunnel leads around the river and then seems to slope downward, while the other is directly above a light source in the ceiling. The second one is selected to facilitate recovery of the drone. During adjustment of the drone's flight path, it comes in contact with a portion of tunnel wall coated in SCP-610, causing a deep gash. Then the propeller of the drone, which is already healing over when the camera focuses on the impact point. Drone proceeds upwards. 300 meters of upward travel, taking approximately 45 minutes, results in the drone emerging into a windy section of mountain where it is directed to stay low. Camera panning of the area reveals what may have been a village long since abandoned. The precise location is unclear, but assumed to be in the vicinity of Site B, judging from estimates and travel by the drone. Buildings here are coated with deceased layers of SCP-610, and unlike other buildings in Site A and C, which are coated in 610, these buildings appear entirely constructed from the tissue substance. After a cursory scan of Site B, it is determined that there is no life here, either natural or SCP-610 related, so the drone is directed back into the tunnel, as the winds around the area make aerial recovery impossible. Upon descent into the tunnel, a deep roaring sound fills the audio and video feed, becomes choppy as something blocks the signal. During the periods in which connection to the drone is clearest, its camera and weapons are angled downwards and propellers in slow speed to allow for a faster drop. Video feed becomes entirely clear in the final 2 minutes before feed is lost. Rushing up towards the drone from the area below is what appears to be a large human face stretched out 20 times its proportion with no features, save those created by the SCP-610 material. There are eye sockets but no eyes, a mouth with no teeth. The drone fires upon the rushing mass of SCP-610, but the bullets do not deter it. Impact points remain invisible for several seconds before closing over themselves. There is no room in the tunnel for the drone to take evasive action before it's followed by the mass. Our SCP-610 is considered lost until 3 hours later when video feed inexplicably returns. The video feed from the drone appears to show a series of structures illuminated by one of the 2 lights on the drone. The camera pans around without instructions from the remote relays or HQ, capturing a vast number of shambling entities within the area. SCP-610 material moves over the lens of the drone and video feed is permanently severed. Manned explorations are approved. Results in document SCP-610-L5. Approval from Central HQ was granted for a manned assault excursion into the tunnels beneath Site A to try to ascertain the extent of SCP-610 infection. Destruction of Site A and Site C have established that SCP-610 can be contained and destroyed, making the source of infection top priority. The initial descent into the tunnels consisted of 5 teams, 2 research and 3 assault, along with enough equipment to establish an underground base of operations. Descent into tunnels was established using pulley systems and a lift to move equipment. Assault teams were the first to descend, armed with flame units to clean SCP-610 out the area. All teams were able to descend without incident, and flame units took point, providing an undisturbed journey towards the water source where the SCP-610 drone was lost. Base camp for underground SCP-610 operations resides at the bottom of a 3-way junction, floor if the water flow is included. The first pathway is that which led from Site A to Cavern HQ. The second is a pathway to the ruined village residing in the mountains where SCP-610 was destroyed by the large unknown SCP-610 entity. The third pathway heads west and seems to follow the flow of water for an unknown distance. The cavern area here is quite large and supported by a number of rock formations that are coated with decayed SCP-610 material. The state of this material suggests great age and appears to reinforce the structural supports. Whether this is intentional or coincidental is unknown. The two research teams split activities between building Cavern HQ and collecting samples of SCP-610 in various stages. No contagious materials were detected within this area, and the creature recorded by unmanned drones did not appear at any point with the Cavern staff. One of the four research teams, 3 were ordered to proceed down an unexplored pathway, while an aerial drone was prepared for a second recon of the vertical shaft. SCP-610 infection did not appear in the third pathway until approximately 3 kilometers, and serious infection did not appear until 16 kilometers in. Even after the lengths traveled by the assault teams, no SCP-610 infectious life forms were encountered in the fleshy material coating the cavern walls, posed no threat to the team. The most significant reports at this time were the increasing thickness of material, suggesting a source, and complete lack of SCP-610 contamination in water. As a test, a sample of SCP-610 was cut away from the cavern wall and placed into a flow of water. It exhibited no unusual reactions, but was quickly sucked away by the current. At 20 kilometers in, the leader of the assault teams requested a transport buddy be dispatched to one of them. One was available at the above-ground HQ. However, it would take time to move it into Cavern HQ and then remote drive it to the teams. Rations provided to the assault teams were sufficient, so a camp was established while the buddy was moved and readied. During this time, an aerial drone was also sent to explore the vertical shaft. The results of this exploration were placed on hold with the arrival of the buddy at Cavern HQ and ultimately concluded in document. The buddy was navigated to the assault team encampment with no events en route. However, upon arrival and preparation to continue the exploration, the assault teams came under attack by a number of large SCP-610 infected life forms from the area ahead of them. Video recovered from the assault team shows them caught off guard as the SCP-610 infected made no sound and were undetectable. On one film, for 4 to 2 seconds, it appears some of the creatures coming out of the SCP-610 materials in the wall, not emerging from them so much as being created by the material and breaking away as to act independently. During this assault, an attempt to protect the buddy, members were lost due to the water currents and contact with them was lost. Contact was regained, however, and it was reported in SCP-610-L6. The remainder of the assault team now consisted of 3 members, armed with a single flame unit. The use of this unit to repel the assault proved vital, as standard firearms did minimal damage to the infected creatures. These infected creatures show minimal traits to associate them with any known form of life in the region, giving rise to the belief that they may have been spawned by the SCP-610 infection itself as a form of defense. No further casualties were suffered during the raid, and remaining members managed to eliminate all attacked and infected, allowing them to continue the exploration with added orders to attempt to locate lost team members. A further 20 kilometers into the tunnel, a river separated from pathway tunnel, and the team was instructed to abandon the recovery order, given the inability to navigate the water safely. A total time of passed before the remaining assault team reached the end of the tunnel. At the perimeter of the area, now known as Site B, the team came under assault again from a smaller number of SCP-610 that were much larger in size. These infected appeared in the tunnel as if they were lying in wait for the approaching team. These creatures were dispatched using the flame unit, although the fuel for the unit was expended in this act. The assault team was now limited to standard weapons and short-range personal flame units. Time lapse of 5 minutes is allowed to pass before the team proceeds into the further location of Site B, cautious of further assaults by SCP-610 infected. The tunnel widens into what appears to have once been a village of indeterminate age. The construction of the buildings in this area are primitive compared to the settlements at Site A and Site C, and are clearly of human construction. Many buildings rest at angles or slants, suggesting they were disturbed by a cave-in. One of interest is a building that appears to be a church with a working clock tower. This building is built atop the remains of 2 older buildings that have fallen completely and has visibly stable foundation. Surrounding all structures in this area is a depression in the ground filled with substance resembling a liquefied form of SCP-610 fleshy materials. The pool moves as if acted upon by minute and unseen forces, rippling outwards from invisible contact points and rolling in waves from unfelt winds. Teams avoid this pool at all times, proceed through the ruins slowly on stable foundations where possible, making the church their target area. Within the church are pews, as would be expected, however there are only 4, and one of them shattered within the building could accommodate as many as 20. 3 intact pews are arranged in a 2-1 formation facing the pulpit. There is no trace of dust on the surface, the entire area appearing to be immaculately clean given the location and believed age. Behind the pulpit is a hole in the floor exposing an area of SCP-610 pool underneath the building. The church and ruins appear to be uninhabited, and the exploration of a church proper is uneventful until the clock tower bell tolls. This tolling triggers a shudder in the building and followed by human screams from the ceiling. Lights shown upon the ceiling reveal a large mass of SCP-610 which descend in a series of 6 wooden circles. Strapped to each circle is a living human coated entirely from neck to toe in SCP-610, but having an exposed head which appears to be uninfected. These human captives scream as the bell continues to toll and the circle moves to the ground. The team begins to move toward one to investigate. When an unknown creature cries from outside the building, prompting them to take cover in the shadows near the pulpit. Light sources are extinguished, pitching the entire area into darkness. Night vision is left off to avoid the revealing of the team's location. Sounds continue to emit from the outside of the church, drawing closer but lower in the frantic screams of the captive humans. At least one noticed the team, as the captive humans often call out to be saved. From the entrance of the church, candle lights on the doorway, then one on the other side. A figure is seen holding a small torch and moving back and forth in a series of candles to light the doorway. The flame is then applied to a large rope coated in SCP-610, which quickly ignites and spreads up to a peculiar chandelier system at the church's entrance. The light from this system illuminates most of the crosses but does not reach the team's hiding place. The captives who appear to be in the light do not show standard signs of beige-colored SCP-610 infection, but instead are wrapped in a red variant of it, which shows signs of constant motion rippling across itself in waves. From outside the church, a flood of SCP-610 infected channeled quickly into the area, ignoring the man who lit the candles and stands in the middle of the room. They proceed to the captives on the wooden circles and began to pull the red SCP-610 masses, resulting in further screams and cries. From what can be gathered from the return video feed, the red SCP-610 appears to be connected to the captives and is using them as a source of sustenance that it then uses to grow and feed the normal SCP-610 infected. Overly zealous infected carried the red mass too hard, resulting in pulling skin and tissue from the human captive beneath. This exposed area is quickly covered by the red mass, which then grows in size, feeding light discontinuous for approximately 6 minutes, at which time the candle-bearing figure sounds like a gong, and all infected entities move to the pews. There are several more creatures in seats, but none move past the frontmost pews. The figure who sounded the gong does not move, spontaneously collapsing as if made from hollow clay. In the pulpit area, activity is noticed as a pillar of SCP-610 flesh rises through the hole and extends, directing itself towards the gathered creatures. No sound is heard, but no motion is recorded once the pillar stops moving. This silent period persists for about 10 minutes without the human captives even making a sound, having fallen silent at an unknown point. The pillar of SCP-610 retracts back into the hole and emerged from without any warning, prompting the departure of the infected from the building. The candles remain lit and the team emerges after all the infected appear to have left the area. The descended captives remain ground level as well, all screaming seeming to have ceased, but still showing signs of life with heavy breathing and movement. Upon departure from the church, camera feed from all 3 members becomes erratic. Camera 1 ceases transmitting completely. Camera 2 shoots straight up in the air for several meters. Camera 3 captures a member with camera 2 being flung by a tendril that emerges from the ground itself, swinging him out of sight onto the other side of the ruins. Camera 1's feed is restored and displays camera 3's owner running briefly in the direction of the last team member, only to run back as SCP-610 infected pour from between buildings. Combat ensues between the 2 members on the onrushing infected using assault rifles and personal flame units, successfully driving them back enough of the horde to escape towards the buggy. Passing by a building, camera 1's owner is ambushed by a figure resembling the figure who was in the church lighting candles, wielding a large crop scythe. Camera 1's owner continues without pause towards the buddy location. However, the buddy is found half absorbed by SCP-610 mass covering the floor. While trying to find another way of escape, Camera 3's owner turns to find the same figure with the scythe approaching. Weapons raised, 2 shots are fired, and the camera feed ends. 5 hours later, while the final decisions were underway to decide how to contain or eradicate the SCP-610 threat, time-delayed video feed from lost team members who fell to the underground river currents was established and has been filed in SCP-610-L6. If you made it to this point, I just want to say thanks. If you could like, or subscribe, that would do a great benefit to me. I'm trying to hit 150 subs by the end of summer, so I'll probably release a new video sometime tomorrow, if not after that. But yeah, see ya.